and put the same over the Jews and Christians. Then let the humble slaves get into paradise by virtue of my mercy. And notice Allah's mercy here is taking the sins of taking the sins of Muslims and putting them on the Jews and Christians. Am I crazy here, IP? How are you reading this?
No, it sounds exactly like you said it. It sounds like Jews and Christians will get all the sins that these horrible Muslims, but the text says they're humble for some reason, will get all their sins and we'll have to pay for them so they can get into paradise.
So we're not talking about your average Muslim friend who may be a totally nice guy, maybe one of the nicest people, maybe one of the most moral people you've ever met. The passage says it's talking about especially horrible people, like people with sins as heavy as mountains. These guys have been doing horrible stuff all their lives, and yet somehow these are humble servants of Allah. And apparently Allah can't just let these sins slide. They're mountains of sins. He has to do something. Someone has to pay for these mountains of sins. But Allah specifically said he's going to tell the angels, take these mountains of sins off the Muslims and put them on the Jews and Christians. That's what I brought up. And the point I was making in that video is, again, you could walk up to 100 Muslims, ask them about any of these passages. They've never heard them before. If they have heard them before, they either heard them from us or they heard them from their dawah guy who's only responding because people asked him after hearing it from us. In other words, Muslims go their entire lives without ever hearing about these passages. Their imams never bring them up. Their families never bring them up. They do not know that these passages exist until we bring them up and say, hey, you guys are running around saying, oh, it's immoral for Jesus to pay for your sins in Christianity. In Islam, everyone pays for his own sins. We say, that's not what your prophet said. Look at what your prophet said. And then what do? They've never heard this before. So they run to one of their dawah guys and say, hey, dawah guy, what's up with this passage? You've been telling me one thing my entire life, and now this Christian pointed out Muhammad said the exact opposite.